Now let's start off by saying this about Sukkot. Sukkot is the festival at which palm branches are used in the worship. The minute that anyone uses palm branches, they're actually saying Sukkot. The second thing to say about Sukkot is that Sukkot is the time for the Messiah to come. It is the third of the series of feasts that take place during the 7th month cycle. The first is Yom Kippur, which is the Feast of Trumpets, which remembers the creation and also remembers the creation of the second Adam, the birth of the second Adam. Then there is Yom Kippur, which is when Yeshua entered behind the drape with the blood of goats and steers, or his own blood instead of goats and steers. And then the last festival is Sukkot, which is the festival that remembers his return. So let us start off with Sukkot then. But on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered the produce of the land, you are to observe the festival of Adonai 7 days. The first is to be a complete rest, and the 8th day is to be a complete rest. On the first day, you are to take choice fruits, palm fronds, thick branches, and river willows, and celebrate in the presence of Yudevave your Elohim for 7 days. You are to observe it as a feast to Yudevave 7 days in the year. It is a permanent regulation, generation after generation. Keep it in the 7th month. You are to live in sukkahs for 7 days. Every citizen in Israel is to live in a sukkah that is actually a hut, so that generation after generation of you will know that I made the people of Israel live in Sukkot when I brought them up out of Egypt. I am Adonai, your Elohim. Thus Moshe announced to the people of Israel the designated times of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now let's go and have a look at what Scripture says in the New Covenant. We know that when a tent which houses us here on earth is torn down, we have a permanent building from Elohim, a building not made by human hands, to house us in heaven. So what this actually starts saying is that we have a sukkah, because Tabernacles actually also is a tent. So we have a tent that is here on earth that is torn down, and we have a permanent building with God that is not made with human hands, that is meant to house us in heaven. For in this tent, our earthly body, we groan with desire to have around us the home from heaven that will be ours. So we yearn for the sukkah that is from heaven, and not for the sukkah that we have here, which is our normal bodies. With this around us, we will not be found naked. Now this nakedness immediately is speaking back into the nakedness of Adam and Eve in the garden after the fall in sin. So this home in which we are to be housed is actually the Spirit. And then it says, yes, while we are in this body, we will groan with a sense of being oppressed. It is not so much that we want to take something off, but rather that we want to put something on over it, so that what must die must be swallowed up by the life. So this is the yearning, is that we will actually live in the Ruach, in the Shekhinah, in the presence of God. Moreover, it is Elohim who has prepared us for this very thing, and as a pledge, he has given us his Spirit. Now his Spirit, again, is the Shekhinah. So we are clothed with this Spirit when we are in Messiah, and Messiah in us. So you see, this tent of which is spoken here is more than just what we will be after we die, but also what we will be whilst we're still alive, and when the Spirit comes into us. So we are always confident. We know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from our home with the Lord. For we live by trust, not by what we see. We are confident then, and would much prefer to leave our home in the body and come to our home with the Lord. So we yearn to be in the Ruach, in the Shekhinah. Therefore, whether at home or away from home, we try our utmost to please him. So in other words, when we're in the Spirit, and also when we are not in the Spirit, we try to please Him. For we must all appear before Messiah's court of judgment, where everyone will receive the good or bad consequences of what he did while he was in the body. So this portion actually speaks of Sukkot, of the Feast of Tabernacles. 1 Corinthians 5, 11 and 12. So it is with the fear of the Lord before us that we try to persuade people. Moreover, Elohim knows us as we really are, and I hope that in your consciences you too know us as we really are. We're not recommending ourselves to you again, but giving you a reason to be proud of us, so that you will be able to answer those who boast about a person's appearance rather than his inner qualities. So you see that the upshot of the work of the Spirit, according to this, is not what people can see, but what we are. So we should be judging people by what they are and not by what we see. However, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you are to understand that she's about to be destroyed. Those in Yehuda must escape to the hills, those inside the city must get out, and those in the country must not enter it. For these are the days of vengeance, when everything that has been written in the Tanakh will come true. What a terrible time it will be for pregnant women and nursing mothers, for there will be a great distress in the land and judgment on the people. Some will fall by the edge of the sword, others will be carried into all the countries of the Goyim, and Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Goyim until the age of the Goyim has run its course. This actually, when Yeshua spoke it, was a prophecy of the time when Jerusalem would be destroyed, the temple would be destroyed, and Israel would be scattered into the nations. And then the interesting thing is, it says that Jerusalem will be trampled by the nations until the age of the nations has run its course. As long as Israel does not accept the Messiah, they are part of the nations and are not true Israel. And therefore, they are one of the nations who are trampling Jerusalem until such time as the peace of Jerusalem comes. Because the peace of Jerusalem is a person. It is not a condition. So let me repeat that. The peace of Jerusalem is a person. It is Yeshua. It is not a condition. It is not peace in Israel that this is about. It is when the true peace of Jerusalem reappears. Therefore, with a hope like this, we are very open, unlike Moshe, who put a veil over his face so that the people of Israel would not see the fading brightness come to an end. What is more, their minds were made stone-like. For to this day the same veil remains over them when they read the Old Covenant. It has not been unveiled, because only by Messiah is the veil taken away. Yes, till today, whenever Moshe is read, a veil lies over their heart. But, says the Torah, whenever someone turns to Adonai, the veil is taken away. Now, Adonai in this text means the Spirit, and where the Spirit of Adonai is, there is freedom. So all of us, with faces unveiled, see as in a mirror the glory of Yudevave, and we are being changed into his very image from one degree of glory to the next by Yudevave, the Ruach. Israel is veiled. When the veil is removed, then we start looking in a mirror and we start seeing Yudevave, and we are changed into his image. So this actually means that a transformation takes place by which we actually come to righteousness. Now, when the Spirit comes into us, we can start entering the condition that Abraham was in, where he heard the voice, obeyed it, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 4:14 to 18. At that time, Yudevave ordered me to teach you laws and rulings, that you would live by them in the land you are entering in order to take possession of it. Therefore, watch out for yourselves, since you did not see a shape of any kind on the day Yudevave spoke to you in Horeb from the fire. Do not become corrupt and make yourselves a carved image having the shape of any figure, not a representation of a human being, male or female, or a representation of any animal on earth, or a representation of any bird that flies in the air, or a representation of anything that creeps on the ground, or a representation of any fish in the water below the shoreline. And this speaks into the fact that all idolatry, all false worship has to disappear completely before Messiah would come. For the same reason, do not look up at the sky, at the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything in the sky, and be drawn away to worship and serve them. Yudevave, your Elohim, has allotted these to all the peoples under the entire sky. No, you, Yudevave, has taken and brought you out of the smelting furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of inheritance for him, as you are today. So this is actually saying that Israel is not to be involved in any form of idolatry. Now Shaul says that everyone who believes in the Messiah becomes part of Israel, and therefore we are all part of Israel. And after this, now that just sets a preamble to what has to happen before Messiah comes. In other words, there are these wars that are going to happen, and then Israel is going to come to faith, and then the Messiah will come. After this, Yeshua traveled around in Galilee, intentionally avoiding Yehuda because the Judeans were about to kill him, but the festival of Sukkot in Judah was near. So as a Jew, he was obligated to go to the festival of Sukkot. So his brother said to him, leave here and go to Yehuda so that your Talmidim, your disciples, can see the miracles you do. For no one who wants to become known acts in secret. If you're doing these things, show yourself to the world. His brothers spoke this way because they had not put their trust in him. Yeshua said to them, my time has not yet come, but for you, any time is right. The world cannot hate you, but it does hate me, because I keep telling it how wicked its ways are. You go up to the festival. As for me, I'm not going up to this festival now, because the right time for me has not yet come. But remember, he's a Jew, so he's obligated to go. Having said this, he stayed on in the Galilee, but after his brothers had gone to the festival, he too went up, not publicly, but in secret. At the festival, the Judeans were looking for him. Where is he? They asked, and among the crowds there was much whispering about him. Some said he's a good man, others said no, he's deceiving the masses. However, no one spoke about him openly for fear of the Judeans. Now check what Yeshua does, because this is what is called prophetic action. Not until the festival was half over did Yeshua go up to the temple courts and begin to teach. Now, it is well known that the Great Tribulation was meant to be 7 years long, but that it has been shortened because the elect would not be able to survive it. So here is this thing of Yeshua appearing in the middle of Sukkot, after the 3.5 years, by manner of speaking. The Judeans were surprised. How does this man know so much without having studied, they asked. So Yeshua gave them the answer, my teaching is not my own, it comes from the one who sent me. If anyone wants to do his will, he will know whether my teaching is from Elohim or I speak on my own. A person who speaks on his own is trying to win praise for himself, but a person who tries to win praise from the one who sent him is honest. There's nothing false about him. So Yeshua is saying, I didn't learn from any of these guys, but I learned from God himself. To see what he's saying, I learned from God himself, because obviously the Messiah learned from God himself. He is God himself. Whereupon Yeshua, continuing to teach in the courts, cried out, indeed you do know me, and you know where I'm from, and I have not come on my own. The one who sent me is real, but him you don't know, and do not know him because I am with him and he sent me. At this they tried to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him because his time had not yet come. However, many in the crowd put their trust in him and said, "When the Messiah comes, will he do more miracles than this man has done?" So they're actually saying this is a time of Sukkot because this man seems to be the Messiah. Now let's go through a little bit of history first and then you'll see why. There was a man who had fallen sick. His name was Elazar, and he came from Bethania, the village where Miriam and her sister Martha lived. This Miriam, whose brother Elazar had become sick, is the one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent a message to Yeshua. "Adonai, the man you love is sick." On hearing it, he said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that the Son of God may receive glory through it." Yeshua loved Martha and her sister and Elazar, so when he heard he was sick, first he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then after this he said to the Talmudim, "Let's go back to Judah." The Talmudim replied, "Rabbi, just a short while ago the Judeans were out to stone you, and you want to go back there." Yeshua is doing something rather incredible, because this man Elazar has an interesting name. Lazarus is how we know him. Now Elazar, El is God, and Azar, Ezer is help. So this is God's help. Now, why would he be God's help? An interesting thing, because Eliezer, also God's help, was the man who fetched the bride for Isaac. Just remember that. He was the help to fetch the bride. Just watch this space. Yeshua answered, "Aren't there 12 hours of daylight? If a person walks during daylight, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if a person walks at night, he does stumble because he has no light with him." Yeshua said these things, and afterwards he said to the Talmudim, "Our friend Elazar has gone to sleep, but I'm going in order to wake him up." The Talmudim said to him, "I don't know, if he's gone to sleep, he'll get better." Now Yeshua had used the phrase to speak about Elazar's death, but they thought he had been talking literally about sleep. So Yeshua told them in plain language, "Elazar has died, and for your sakes I am glad that I wasn't there, so that you may come to trust. But let's go to him." Then Thomas, twin, said to his fellow Talmudim, "Yes, we should go, so that we can die with him." On arrival, Yeshua found that Elazar had been in the tomb for 4 days. There's a Messianic sign. The Messianic sign says that the Messiah will raise someone from the dead who has been dead for 3 days. So Elazar, Elohim's help, the one has to call the bride, has been dead for 4 days. Interestingly, there are 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and those are days devoid of feast for the Jews. And if you look at the centuries, Yom Kippur took place when Yeshua was executed, and Sukkot is to take place when Yeshua reappears. So for these 4 days, this Elazar, this Jew, was dead, as the Jews have been dead to Messiah for these 4 days. Now Bethania was only 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many of the Judeans had come to Martha and Miriam in order to comfort them at the loss of their brother. So when Martha heard that Yeshua was coming, she went out to meet him. But Miriam continued sitting Shiva in the house. Sitting Shiva means mourning the dead. Martha said to Yeshua, "Adonai, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of Elohim, Elohim will give you." She's saying, "I don't know what you're going to do, but I know that Elohim will give you whatever you ask." Now this sitting Shiva, we need to understand that the way that Jewish people mourn the dead is they sit together and they actually praise the Lord. They are not speaking about the dead man. They're praising the goodness of the Lord. Yeshua said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said, "I know that he will rise again at the resurrection on the last day," because the resurrection on the last day is the resurrection of the dead that is in the valley of dead bones of Ezekiel 37. Yeshua said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever puts his trust in me will live even if he dies, and everyone living and trusting in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Adonai, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of Elohim, the one coming into the world." So now she's starting to say, "I know that you're the Messiah." By saying, "I know that you're the Messiah," she's actually indirectly saying, "I know that you would be able to resurrect him from the dead." Then when Yeshua saw her crying, and also the Judeans who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved and also troubled. He said, "Where have you buried him?" They say, "Adonai, come and see." Yeshua cried, so the Judeans said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "He opened the blind man's eyes. Couldn't he have kept this one from dying?" Yeshua, again deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying in front of the entrance. Now, if Elazar is an image of Israel, then it means that Yeshua is crying about the fact that Israel is dead. Yeshua says, "Take the stone away." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to Yeshua, "By now his body must smell because it's been 4 days since he died." Yeshua said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you kept trusting, you will see the glory of Elohim?" So they removed the stone. Yeshua looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I myself know that you always hear me, but I say this because of the crowd standing around, so that they may believe that you sent me." Having said this, he shouted, "Elazar, come out." The dead man who had been dead came out, his hands and feet wrapped in strips of linen, and his face covered with a cloth. Yeshua said to them, "Unwrap him and let him go." So he's actually calling Israel out of the grave here. And then he's saying, get rid of all these strips of all of this wrapping that is around Israel, that is keeping them from seeing who Yeshua truly is. So that has to be removed. At this, many of the Judeans who had come to visit Miriam and had seen what Yeshua had done trusted in him. Obviously, he had resurrected someone from the dead. He must be the Messiah. But some of them went off to the Pharisees and told them what he had done. So obviously, they knew that the Pharisees had to know, because the Pharisees also would have to acknowledge. So they called a meeting of the Sanhedrin and they say, what are we going to do? For this man is performing many miracles. He's actually performing many Messianic signs. He's resurrected someone from the dead. He has healed someone born blind. He has healed someone who has been lame since childhood. And he has healed the lepers. All of those are Messianic signs. So he's proving that he's the Messiah. If we let him go on this way, everyone will trust in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both the temple and the nation. Because if he's the Messiah, he's the King of Israel. If he's the King of Israel, there has to be a war that is going to come now, because it will be a war between him and the Romans, because he's the King of the Jews. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was Kohen Gadol that year, said, "You people don't know anything. You don't see that it's better for you that one man dies on behalf of the people so that the whole nation won't be destroyed." Now he didn't speak this way on his own initiative. Rather, since he was Kohen Gadol that year, he was prophesying that Yeshua was to die on behalf of the nation, and not for the nation alone, but so that he might gather into one the scattered children of Elohim. In other words, all of the believers out of the nations would be gathered together as a result of Yeshua's death. But see, they were actually acknowledging that he may be the Messiah. So they need to kill him because he is going to cause a great war here. Isaiah 52, 1-4 speaks into this situation and says, "Awake, awake, Zion, clothe yourself with your strength. Dress in your splendid garments, Jerusalem, the holy city, for the uncircumcised and the unclean will enter you no more. Shake off the dust, arise, be enthroned, Jerusalem. Loosen the chains on your neck, captive daughter of Zion. For thus says Yudevave, you were sold for nothing, you will be redeemed without money. For thus says Yudevave Elohim, long ago my people went down to Egypt to live there as aliens, and Ashur oppressed them for no reason." So the Lord is extending his hand to Jerusalem, to the Jewish people, and saying, "Awake, awake, clothe yourself with splendid garments." Splendid garments, clothe yourself with your prayer shawls. The prayer shawls are actually an image of the Shekhinah. Have yourself clothed with me. And now, what should I do here, asks Yudevave, since my people were carried off for nothing? Their oppressors are howling, says Yudevave, and my name is always being insulted daily. Therefore my people will know my name. Therefore on that day they will know that I, the one speaking, here I am. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, proclaiming shalom, bringing good news of good tidings, announcing salvation and saying to Zion, your Elohim is king. So this is the proclamation that actually was made as Yeshua was on his way to his death. But it is also a proclamation to be made at the end of time, because obviously they were recognizing the Messiah, but they were also, by manner of speaking, saying, but this also is a future thing. Now Yeshua goes to Beit Anya 6 days before the Passover, to where Elazar lived, the man who had raised from the dead. Yeshua goes to the house of a man who proves that he's the Messiah. And that Sunday evening, because this is actually the evening of the Sabbath, and this is a long story, so please just believe me, it's the evening of the Sabbath here. So he's having a Sabbath dinner with him. Martha served the meal, and Elazar was amongst those on the table with him. So he has a Messianic sign sitting at the table with him on the 10th day of the month of Abib, which is the day of the choice of the lamb. It is 6 days before the Passover that he came to Beit Anya. The Passover, actually unleavened bread, is the 15th, so 6 days before the 15th is the 9th, and when the sun sets it's the 10th, and that is the day of the choice of the lamb. So he was sitting at that table then. And then Miriam took a whole pint of pure oil of spikenard, which is very expensive, poured it on Yeshua's feet and wiped his feet with her hair, so that the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of the Talmidim, Yehuda from Kriat, Judas from the Iscariot, the one who was about to betray him, said, "This perfume is worth a year's wages. Why wasn't it sold and the money given to the poor?" Now, he didn't say this out of concern for the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of the common purse and used to steal from it. Yeshua said, "Leave her alone. She kept this for the day of my burial." See what she's anointing here. She's anointing his feet. His feet, by manner of speaking, are his motive. Our motive is to be preparedness for the gospel. His motive was to go and die. So she anoints his motive to go and die for her. And then she wipes it with her hair. So the anointing on his feet for the fact that he is going to die is in her hair. And in this she becomes an image of the bride. And the anointing of the head of the bride is the fact that her bridegroom was prepared to die for her. And this is an incredible thing, because Messiah was dying for the bride, and this was kept for the day of his burial. So the next day, a large crowd of Judeans learned that he was there. They came not only because of Yeshua, but also so that they could see Eleazar, whom he had raised from the dead, the Messianic Sign. The head Kohanim then decided to do away with Eleazar too, since it was because of him that large numbers of the Judeans were leaving their leaders and putting their trust in Yeshua. There's something happening here. A large crowd is exiting Jerusalem on the day, on what is called Palm Sunday, but it's actually Palm Shabbat. And just bearing the palms, they're saying, this is Sukkot, he's the Messiah, we're welcoming the Messiah. So they go out and they fetch him outside the city and they bring him into the city. See the imagery of the rapture here. He goes out to fetch them and he brings them right back. So there is no delay in this whole process. This means that the bride will go and fetch Yeshua when he returns. And you will see how this is then borne out. The next day, the large crowd that had come for the festival heard that Yeshua was on his way into Jerusalem. They took palm branches. So they were saying, this is Sukkot, this is the Messiah. And they went out to meet him, shouting, deliver us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the King of Israel. See, they're saying what Isaiah said. After finding a donkey colt, Yeshua mounted it just as the Tanakh says, daughter of Zion, don't be afraid. Look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. Now, this also is an important thing that is happening here, because a triumphant king enters the city on the back of a donkey. So this is what is happening here. They went to fetch the triumphant king who was to enter Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, as does a triumphant king. So they were saying this is the Messiah. His Talmudim did not understand that as this at first, but after Yeshua had been glorified, then they remembered that the Tanakh said this about him and that they had done this for him. The group that had been with him when he called Eleazar out of the tomb and raised him from the dead had been telling about it. It was because of this too that the crowd came out to meet him. They had heard that he had performed this miracle. The Prushim said to each other, look, you're getting nowhere. Why? The whole world has gone after him. Now they're really in a panic because everyone is now following Yeshua and they need to do something. They brought it to Yeshua, threw their robes on the colt, they put Yeshua on it, he went along, people carpeted the road with their clothing, and as he came near Jerusalem, where the road descends from the Mount of Olives, the entire band of disciples began to sing and praise Elohim at the top of their voices for the powerful works they had seen. He had healed someone born blind. He had healed someone lame since birth. He had resurrected someone from the dead, and he had healed the lepers. So they're praising God because the Messiah is here. Blessed is the King coming in the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Shalom in heaven and glory in the highest places. Some in the crowd said to him, Rabbi, reprimand your Talmudim. So the Pharisees didn't like this and wanted him to. And he answered them, I tell you that if you keep quiet, the stones will shout. When Yeshua had come closer and could see the city, he wept over it, saying, if only you knew today what is needed for your shalom, but for now it is hidden from your sight. So the veil is still there. For the days are coming upon you when your enemies will set a barricade around you, encircle you, hem you in on every side, and dash you to the ground, you and your children within your walls, leaving not one stone standing on another, and all because you did not recognize the opportunity when Elohim offered it. So you did not recognize the Messiah, and he's saying, and you're going to kill him. Yeshua gave them this answer: the time has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Yes, I tell you that unless a grain of wheat that falls into the ground dies, it stays just a grain. But if it dies, it produces a large harvest. So he's saying that the glory of the Son of Man is his death, because he is grain that has to die so that it can bring a big harvest. And the big harvest is actually his glory. He who loses his life, loves his life, loses it, but he who hates his life in this world will keep it safe right on into eternal life. So he says, if you die to yourself and to your sin, you will live forever. But if you refuse to die to self and to sin, you will remain unsaved. If someone is serving me, let him follow me. Wherever I am, my servant will be there too. My Father will honor anyone who serves me. In other words, who dies as I do. Now I'm in a turmoil. What can I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it was for this very reason I have come to this hour. I will say this: I am the Messiah. I'm going to die. Father, glorify your name. At this, a voice came out of heaven. I have glorified it before, and I will glorify it again. The crowd standing there and hearing said that it had thundered. Others said an angel spoke to him. Yeshua answered, this voice did not come for my sake, but for yours. Now is the time for this world to be judged. Now the ruler of this world will be expelled. As for me, when I'm lifted up from the earth, I will draw everyone to myself, when I am executed on the stake. And he's saying, I have glorified it before, and I will glorify it again. And therefore he's saying that I have died at the stake before, and I will die again. How can he say that? He can say it because when he died, he also died in eternity. And eternity, yesterday, today, and tomorrow are all the same time. So even though he died at the time that would be Passover, Yom Kippur, he actually died before the foundation of the earth was laid. And by manner of speaking, he died in eternity, so that he could pay forever. The crowd stood there and hearing it said that it had thundered. Others said an angel has spoken. And then Yeshua said this thing that we've just alluded to. But when the head Kohanim and the head priests and the Torah teachers saw the wonderful things he was doing, and the children crying out in the temple, please deliver us to the Son of David, they were furious, because the Son of David is the Messiah. They said to him, do you hear what they're saying? Yeshua replied, of course. Haven't you ever heard from the mouths of children and infants you have prepared praise for yourself? So the praise prepared from the mouths of infants and children is meant for Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. And he's saying, I am Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, I am the Messiah. So he's saying this is a time of Sukkot. But he answered them, you see all these? Yes, I tell you, they will be totally destroyed. Not a single stone will be left standing. While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the Talmudim came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will these things happen? And what will the sign that you are coming and that the present world is ending? Yeshua says, watch out. Don't let anyone fool you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they will lead many astray. You will hear the noise of wars nearby, and the news of wars far off. See to it that you don't become afraid. Such things must happen, but the end is yet to come. So the fact that there are wars is not the reason why he will come. For peoples will fight each other, nations will fight each other. There will be famines and earthquakes in various parts of the world. All this is but the beginning of the birth pains. And that time you will be arrested and handed over to be punished and put to death, and all peoples will hate you because of me. And that time many will be trapped into betrayal and hating each other. You know, there have been more violent earthquakes on Earth since 1980, 18 to date, than there was in the preceding history of the world. And then he says, they will arrest and persecute you, but make up your minds not to worry, not to rehearse your defense beforehand, for I myself will give you an eloquence and a wisdom that no adversary will be able to resist or refute. So he's saying that in the moment, I will give you the words that you are to speak in my name. By standing firm, you will save your lives. And then he says, the days of vengeance will come. Jerusalem will be destroyed. Jerusalem was destroyed when the temple was destroyed, but the final destruction of Jerusalem will yet take place at the end of time. Jeremiah 31:31 to 34. Here the days are coming, says Yudevaveh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers on the day I took them by their hand and brought them out of the land of Egypt. For they, for their part, violated my covenant, even though I, for my part, was a husband to them, says Yudevaveh. And this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yudevaveh. I will put my Torah within them and write it on their hearts. I will be their Elohim. They will be my people. No longer will any of them teach his fellow community member or his brother, know Yudevaveh, for all will know me, from the least of them to the greatest, because I will forgive their wickednesses and remember their sins no more. This is what Yudevaveh says, who gives the sun as light for the day, who ordained the laws for the moon and stars to provide light for the night, who stirs up the sea until its waves roar. Yudevaveh Tzavaot is his name. If these laws leave my presence, says Yudevaveh, then the offspring of Israel will stop being a nation in my presence forever. So he's saying Israel will never stop being a nation in my presence. This is what Yudevaveh says. If the sky above can be measured and the foundations of the earth can be fathomed, then I will reject all the offspring of Israel for all that they have done, says Yudevaveh. Look, the days are coming, says Yudevaveh, when the city will be rebuilt for Adonai from the tower of Hananel to the corner gate. Hananel, the grace of God to the corner gate. And the grace of God is the Spirit in us. So let's just go and see what Thessalonians now says. So there's the one thing that is guaranteed, and that is that at the end Israel will come to faith. When we say this, we base it on Yudevaveh's own word. We who remain alive when Yudevaveh comes will certainly not take precedence over those who have died. For Yudevaveh himself will come down from heaven with a rousing cry, with a call from one of the ruling angels, with Elohim shofar. Those who died united with Messiah will be the first to rise. Then we who are left will still alive will be caught up with them in the clouds to meet Yudevaveh in the air, and thus we will always be with Yudevaveh, the rapture again. This actually means that just before those final wars and the final destruction of all evil takes place, he will take us up into him, and then he will destroy everyone who is evil and come back. But once again, this is the return of a triumphant king. So this is a short-term thing. This actually means that this will take place at the end of the tribulation. Now, something that precedes this actually is, I was given a measuring rod like a stick and told, get up and measure the temple of Elohim and the altar and count how many people are worshipping there. But the court outside the temple, leave that out. Don't measure it, because it has been given to the Goyim, and they will trample over the holy city for 42 months. 3.5 years they will trample Jerusalem. But these 3.5 years, by manner of speaking, also are these 2,000 years that are between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Also I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, dressed in sackcloth. Now if you divide that, you will actually see that it's 42 months. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 menorahs standing before Yudhevaveh of the earth. So the question is, who are these 2 witnesses? They have the authority to shut up the sky so that no rain falls during the period of their prophesying. That is Elijah, because Elijah had the power to bring rain or to keep it away. Also they have the authority to turn waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. That is Moses, because that's what Moses did in Egypt. When they finish their witnessing, the beast coming out of the abyss will fight against them, overcome them and kill them, and their dead bodies will lie in the main street of the great city, whose name, to reflect its spiritual kingdom, is Sodom, and Egypt, the city where Yudhevaveh was executed on the stake. So this is Jerusalem. They will lie in the streets of Jerusalem. Some from the nations, tribes, languages, and people see their bodies for 3.5 days and do not permit the corpses to be placed in a tomb. The people living in the land rejoice over them. They celebrate and send each other gifts because these 2 prophets tormented them so. Because this is Moses and the prophets, the law and the prophets that come to torment. But after the 3.5 days, a breath of life from Elohim entered them. They stood up on their feet, and a great fear fell on those who saw them. And the 2 heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." They went up into heaven in a cloud, while their enemies watched them. In that hour there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city collapsed. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were awestruck and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe has passed. See, the third woe is coming quickly. The 7th angel sounded his shofar, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Adonai and his Messiah, and he will rule forever and ever." So this then happens where he calls the two prophets up to him. He calls Moses and Elijah up to him. The 24 elders sitting on their thrones in Elohim's presence fell on their faces and worshipped Elohim, saying, "We thank you, Yudhevaveh, Elohim of Elohims, of heaven's armies, the one who is and was, that you have taken your power and have become to rule." Now the Elohim of God's armies is actually the commander of the armies of God, and that is Yeshua again. The Goyim raged, but now your rage has come. The time for the dead to be judged, the time for awarding your servants, the prophets, and your holy people, those who stand in awe of your name, both small and great. It is also the time for destroying those who destroy the earth. So here we have this whole image of God who is coming to destroy those who destroy the earth. And obviously that is after the 2 witnesses and the people who go along with them have been taken away. Interestingly, let's just have a look. I've been looking at a menorah, verse 2, the second part. It's all of gold with a bowl at its top, 7 lamps on it, and 7 tubes leading to the lamps at its top. Next to it are 2 olive trees, one on the right side of the bowl and the other on its left. Then I asked the angel speaking to them, "What are these, my Yudhevaveh?" The angel speaking with me said, "Don't you know what these are?" I said, "No, my Lord." Then he answered me, "This is the word of Yudhevaveh to Zerubbabel, not by force, not by power, but by my spirit, says Adonai Tzavot." So he will do it in gentleness. And then, verse 12. Then I asked the question again.
Can I disturb you?
Yes. I replied by asking verse 11, what are these two olive trees on the right and left side of the menorah? Then I asked the question again, what are these olive branches discharging gold-colored oil through the two gold spouts? He said, don't you know what they are? I answered, no, my Lord. He said, those are the two who have been anointed with oil. They are standing with Adonai of all the land. Clearly again, Moses and the prophets. 6 days later, Yeshua took Kepha, Peter, Yaakov, and his brother Yochanan, Peter, James, actually Jacob, and John, and led them up a high mountain privately. As they watched, he began to change form. His face shone like the sun, and his clothing became as white as light. Then they looked and saw Moshe and Eliyahu speaking to him. Peter said to Yeshua, it's good that we're here, Yudhevave. I'll put up 3 shelters if you want. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Whilst he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from heaven said, this is my son whom I love, with whom I am well pleased. So he was saying this is a time of Sukkot. Here are the 2 prophets. This is Sukkot. We need to build booths. There is an interesting thing about Sukkot. I'm just going to run through the following statements, and that is about the 70 animals that are sacrificed. On the first day, 13 bulls. 13 is the Hebrew number of love, because it's the number of man plus the number of God. The number of man is 6, the number of God, or the cardinal number, is 7. So that's 13. The next day, on the 14th day, and the 14th day is 14 is the number of Messiah, and then there are 12 bulls that are slaughtered. Okay, so the 12 bulls that are slaughtered are the number that are sent out. It's the number of the sons of Jacob, the number of the tribes with inheritance, the number of the disciples, so repetitively 12. Those sent out, the spies sent out 12, each time 12. So on the 14th day, the day of Messiah, that on the 13th day there are 10 bulls. On the 13th day, the day of love, there are 10 bulls, and 10 is the fullness of man, and the day of Yom Kippur is on the 10th. Then the next day, on the 5th day, there are 9 bulls, and 9 bulls are the sign of the Spirit. 9 is the number of the Spirit, and it is on the day of grace, on the 5th day. Then on the 6th day, which is the number of man, there are 8 bulls. So what happens on the day of the number of man is that circumcision, and particularly circumcision of the heart, elevates people to the 8th day, to the day of new beginning that exists only in the spiritual realm. And on the 7th day, the last day of the formal Sukkot, the last day during which the nations are there are 7 bulls. Now 7 is the cardinal number. So on the day for Elohim, there are bulls according to the cardinal number of God. And the next day, the last day of the feast, which is a day of the feast that is to be celebrated only between the Jews and God, because the nations have returned home already. There's only 1 bull. That 1 bull is Yeshua. That 1 bull is his one nation. Then we find this in Revelation 7 verse 3 to 6. Don't harm the land or the sea or the trees until we've sealed the servants of our Elohim on their foreheads. And I heard how many were sealed, 144,000 from every tribe of the people of Israel. That's 12,000. But the interesting thing, 12,000 from each tribe. But an interesting thing happens here. I'm just going to tell you what it is. I'm not going to read through all of this. If you want to, you can go read it. But an interesting thing happens. Ephraim is not named. And the reason Ephraim is not named is because Ephraim caused the division of Israel. But Joseph is named. So Ephraim's father is named, and Yeshua is the son of Joseph because Joseph is the suffering servant. So through Joseph comes in the nations and Ephraim again. And Dan also is not mentioned. But the blessing that was put onto Dan was actually a curse, because it says that he would be a snake in the road who would bite the horse in its heel, and it would throw off its rider. Yeshua is the rider of the horse that is Israel. And Yeshua was thrown off of that horse, and somehow Dan has something to do with it. But Dan and Ephraim find their assimilation into Israel through Joseph, because he is the judge, he is the final judge, and he also is. After this, after the 144,000 are anointed, I looked, there was before me a huge crowd, too large for anyone to count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language. They were standing in front of the throne and in front of the Lamb, dressed in white robes. They were righteous. They were dressed in the Shekhinah, holding palm branches in their hands. They were acknowledging the coming of Messiah, and they shouted, "Victory to our Elohim who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." Then I looked, and then the question is asked by one of the elders, and he asks John, "Who are these?" And John says, "These are those who came to faith." Just go read it for yourself. During the great tribulations, they washed their clothes in the blood of the Lamb. So it actually implies that those are the people who came in as a result of the 144,000. So here is the question. Is it fair that Israel alone has to go through the great tribulation, Israel of faith, because the winds are held back so that they can be sealed off to go through the great tribulation? Or is this going to be the end time believers, who will then be the greatest witnesses of all time, and there's this huge crowd that comes in as a result of them? They were singing, verse 3, they were singing a new song before the throne and before the four living beings and the elders, and no one else could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been ransomed from the world. These are the ones who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They've been ransomed from among humanity as first fruits for Elohim and for the Lamb. So they are a first fruit, the 144,000. That means that through them a great harvest comes in. On their lips no lie was found. They were without defect. Next I saw another angel flying in mid-air with everlasting good news to proclaim to those living on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people in a loud voice, "Fear Elohim, give him glory, for the hour has come when he will pass judgment. Worship the one who has made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water." Another angel, a second one, followed, saying, she has fallen, Babylon the Great. She has made all the nations drink the wine of Elohim's fury caused by her whoring." So Babylon the Great falls, and falls twice. There's reasonable consensus that the reason why she falls twice is because she's both a spiritual entity and she's also a physical entity. What exactly that means, we can discuss at another time. Now on the last day of the festival, Hoshana Rabbah, the great day of the festival, This is actually Simchat Torah. Yeshua stood up and cried out, "If anyone is thirsty, let him keep coming to me and drinking. Whoever puts his trust in me," as the scripture says, "rivers of living water will flow from his innermost being." Now he said this about the Ruach for those who trusted in him were to receive later. The Ruach had not yet been given because Yeshua had not yet been glorified. On hearing these words, some people in the crowd said, "Surely this man is the prophet like Moses." Others said, "This is the Messiah." But others says, "How can the Messiah come from Galilee? Doesn't the Tanakh say that the Messiah is from the seed of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David lived?" Everyone knows that's where he came from. So they're actually declaring he is the Messiah because he said streams of living water. Now the occasion actually is the water libation on the altar. When water is taken from the pool of Siloam, Shiloach, those sent out, and is poured over the altar to cleanse it of all the blood that had to be spilt for the remission of sin. So this is a great day, and it means that the Spirit comes to cleanse of the remission of sin, of us having died to self and to our sin. The Spirit cleanses us of that and has us resurrected to new life. In terms of this Messiah, the Messiah of Sukkot, who is to come. Yeshua came and talked with them. He said, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make people from all nations into disciples, immersing them into the reality of the Father, the Son, and the Ruach HaKodesh, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I will be with you, yes, until the end of the age." Now, in this judgment, people will ask, "When did we see you a stranger and make you our guest, or needing clothes and providing them? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" The king will say to them, "Yes, I tell you that whenever you did these things for one of the least important of these brothers of mine, you did them for me." So kindness that we do to whoever actually is part of why he will admit us to heaven. I think all of you need to go and read Isaiah 55 verse 1 to 5. I just want to go to verse 10. "For just as the rain and the snow fall from the sky and do not return there, but water the earth, causing it to bud and produce, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me unfulfilled, but will accomplish what I intend and cause to succeed what I sent it to do." Now, what this is actually alluding to is that what the Lord is saying, wanting to do, will actually happen, and it will happen because of believers. And then he says, the upshot is, yes, you will go out with joy, you will be led forth in peace. As you come, the mountains and hills will burst out in song, and all the trees in the countryside will clap their hands. Cypresses will grow in place of thorns, myrtles in instead of briars. This will bring fame to Yudevave as an eternal, imperishable sign. Cypresses for thorns, myrtles for briars, thorns and thistles. What are they? The fall in sin. Listen to Romans 8 verses 16 to 20. The Ruach himself bears witness with our own spirits that we are the children of Elohim. And if we are children, then we are also heirs. Heirs of Elohim, joint heirs with the Messiah, provided we suffering with him in order also to be glorified with him. I don't think the sufferings we are going through now are even worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed to us in future. The creation awaits eagerly for the sons of Elohim to be revealed. In other words, for those who live controlled by the Spirit completely to be revealed as a community. For the creation was made subject to frustration, not willingly, but because of the one who subjected it, but it was given a reliable hope, that it too would be set free from its bondage to decay, and would enjoy the freedom accompanying the glory that Elohim's children will have. We know that until now the whole creation has been groaning as with the pains of childbirth, and not only us, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we continue waiting eagerly to make sons, that is, to have our whole bodies redeemed and set free. It was in this hope that we saved, but if we see what we hope for, it isn't hope after all. Who hopes for what he already sees? So he's actually saying, this is Sukkot. You will enter the Sukkot of the millennium of the Messiah.